The rain wasn't falling that afternoon. It was roaring, pounding rooftops and flooding the empty streets as if the sky had decided to wash away every memory it had ever held. I had spent the last 3 years living the same lonely routine after losing everything that once made my house feel like a home. Friends slowly disappeared, neighbors stopped checking in, and silence became my closest companion. Then came 3 urgent knocks on my front door. When I opened it, a young woman stood there completely soaked by the storm, water dripping from her hair and clothes onto the porch. She smiled awkwardly despite shivering from the cold, and said that what she was about to ask would probably sound crazy. She wondered if she could please use my bathroom because her car had broken down miles away. Her phone was dead. Every nearby business had already closed because of the storm, and she simply needed somewhere warm for a few minutes. I hesitated for only a heartbeat before stepping aside. That simple decision would become the beginning of a story neither of us could have imagined. Before we continue, if you believe that one small act of kindness can completely change someone's life, please like this video, comment where you're watching from, share this story with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to our channel, Kindness Legacy. Your support helps us continue sharing heartfelt stories like this one. Her name was Maren, and although she tried to laugh about her situation, exhaustion was written across her face. She looked like someone who had been carrying invisible weight for far too long. While she dried off and borrowed a clean towel, I made a cup of hot coffee and left it on the kitchen table. I expected her to leave as soon as the rain slowed, but the storm only grew stronger. Roads were closing, emergency alerts flashed across the television, and staying for another hour became the safest option. We sat across from each other in complete silence until she quietly thanked me for treating her like a human being. She admitted that 3 houses before mine had refused to answer the door even after seeing her standing in the rain. As the afternoon stretched into evening, our conversation slowly unfolded. I learned that Maren had recently lost her mother after a long illness. She had been driving back from clearing out the small apartment where her mother had lived, carrying only a backpack filled with photographs, handwritten recipes, and a faded family Bible that meant more to her than anything else she owned. She laughed gently whenever she talked about her mother because crying had become too exhausting. I understood that feeling better than most people. Years earlier, I had buried my younger brother after a terrible accident, and grief had quietly stolen pieces of my life ever since. The storm outside somehow made it easier to talk about storms inside ourselves. Hours passed without either of us noticing. When emergency services announced that roads would remain flooded until morning, I offered her the guest room. She refused at first, worried that accepting more kindness would somehow make her a burden. Eventually, she accepted only because there was nowhere else to go. The next morning, the skies were bright blue, almost as if the previous day's storm had never happened. Maren thanked me repeatedly before leaving in a tow truck with her repaired car. Before driving away, she smiled and said that maybe terrible days sometimes existed only to introduce strangers who needed each other more than they realized. Then she disappeared down the road. Weeks passed, and life returned to normal, or at least what I had started calling normal. Then one Saturday afternoon there was another knock on my door. Standing outside was Maren again, this time holding a small apple pie. She explained that it had been her mother's favorite recipe, and that she wanted to thank the person who reminded her that kindness still existed. We shared lunch, laughed about the terrible weather that had brought us together, and exchanged stories that somehow felt impossible to tell anyone else. Over the following months, our friendship grew naturally. We never rushed anything. Some evenings, we simply walked through the neighborhood park. Other weekends, we volunteered together at a local community kitchen serving meals to families struggling through difficult times. Watching Maren encourage frightened children with nothing more than patience and genuine warmth reminded me that broken people often become the gentlest souls, because they understand pain better than anyone else. One afternoon, while organizing donated clothes, an elderly volunteer recognized Maren's last name. She revealed something astonishing. Years earlier, Maren's mother had quietly paid for several struggling families to keep their electricity connected during harsh winters. She had never told anyone because she believed kindness wasn't meant to become a performance. Maren broke into tears. She had spent months believing her mother's life ended without leaving much behind, only to discover that dozens of strangers were still grateful for her compassion. That discovery changed both of us. Instead of focusing on what we had lost, we began asking ourselves what kind of legacy we wanted to leave. We organized neighborhood food drives, helped repair homes damaged by storms, and created a small emergency assistance fund for people facing unexpected hardships. None of it made headlines, but every grateful smile reminded us that ordinary people could create extraordinary change. Nearly a year after the day we first met, another heavy storm rolled across town. This time we weren't hiding from it. Together we drove through flooded streets delivering blankets, food, and dry clothes to families stranded by rising water. At one shelter, a frightened little girl wrapped her arms around Marin after receiving a warm meal. Watching that moment, I realized that the stranger who once knocked on my door asking to use my bathroom had unknowingly rescued me too. She hadn't just found shelter from the rain. I had found shelter from years of loneliness. Sometimes life changes because of huge decisions. Other times it changes because someone chooses to open a door instead of keeping it locked. I spent years believing that protecting my heart meant shutting everyone out. Marin reminded me that kindness always carries risk, but refusing kindness carries an even greater cost. If I had ignored those desperate knocks that rainy afternoon, both of us might have continued living lives filled with quiet sadness. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kindness Legacy. Your support allows these inspiring stories to reach more people around the world. Special request. Before this story ends, please comment, "Kindness opens doors," if you believe one small act of compassion can completely change someone's life. Years later, whenever dark clouds gathered over the town, people often complained about the rain. But every time I heard thunder, I smiled. Because I remembered the afternoon when a soaking wet stranger nervously knocked on my door, apologizing for a request she thought sounded crazy. Neither of us knew that behind that simple request was the beginning of healing, friendship, purpose, and a future neither of us had dared to imagine. Sometimes the greatest miracles don't arrive with fanfare or perfect timing. Sometimes they simply arrive, dripping with rainwater, asking if they can use your bathroom, and quietly leaving your life forever changed.